Welcome back to the Black Rose PDX podcast. Today we have David Walker, industry vet in the comic book industry. He has his runs on Bitter Root with Image Comics, Young Justice with Brian Michael Bendis at DC Comics. He's done stuff with Luke Cage at Marvel. He is also a 25-year vet in the game, publishing his own magazine since 1996 called Azz Mofo. And he also is an adjunct professor at Portland State University. And so we talk about the creative process and what it's like to be a freelancer in the lockdown during the coronavirus. A lot of ups and downs in his journey, and really what has inspired me to follow him and all the stuff that he does. So without further ado, let's get it started. Welcome. In the context of Corona apocalypse, I hope everything is going well with you.
Things are going good. I try to, in some regards, my life hasn't changed that much. I'm still at home all day long working. And so I had to go to the grocery store today to pick up a couple things, and it was like, oh yeah, this is pretty bad, but there's always a line at Fred Meyer. You know what I'm saying? It's always like it was a little bit worse than usual, but not as bad as I've seen it worse, like right around Thanksgiving or Christmas. So but yeah, I'm also just using it to try to be more creative, because it's like I have a ton of time. So
yeah, and it's crazy because I spend about on average, I'll spend probably 1 or 2 days a week just live streaming, and I'll spend 4 or 5 hours on live stream. And I continue to do that. Like, my day-to-day stuff hasn't necessarily changed. It's just that the people that I would typically see once a week or once every other week, I'm video chatting with more than I think I'm comfortable with. It's
yeah, no, it's kind of interesting. I do my web comic, and I post it a couple different places, and the one that I only post it once a week. The one I posted just this week has gotten more likes than any, than probably almost all of them combined. This is my 50-something web comic strip, and it was just like, oh yeah, people are spending a lot of time on Instagram or surfing the net, and if that's what they want to do, that's fine. I'm almost a Luddite. You know what I mean? I know how to use technology, but I would just rather read a book than read off my tablet or anything like that. But I'm also realizing I've got a ton of material. It's how do I put it out there? It's oh, okay, I'll just put some of the stuff on my website.
Mm-hmm.
It's I was a film critic for almost 20 years. I've got tens of thousands of film reviews.
Oh, damn.
Man. There's a lot of them I wouldn't post, but I'm posting one a day.
Okay. Right
now, and it's all only for stuff that you can get. It's either got to be on Amazon or Hulu or Netflix. And it's almost, and all of it's older because I haven't written an actual film review. I wrote one last year or maybe 2 years ago, but I pretty much left completely in 2013.
Okay.
That was when I gave it up.
Okay. So with those film reviews, are you putting the link to the actual movie from Amazon to it?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So
you're doing, so that's what we call outbound links. So those are very crucial for one, Amazon likes it, Google likes it, and then they'll return the favor by giving you some traffic.
No, I've been and it's funny because Amazon has their program, their associates program, with for the outbound links, but it can be really difficult to create a link for a streaming video on Amazon Prime. Just on Amazon Prime or just Amazon streaming, whatever you want to call it. Like, you got to do some detective work in order to find it.
Gosh,
but there's one I'm getting ready to post, and I found it, and I was like, okay, feeling good about this, But it's also weird because, I stopped doing film reviews for a whole host of reasons, but one of them was just because there's so much stuff that the stuff that I was into, it has become pretty hard to find. And there's a lot of older stuff, a lot of like blaxploitation movies, kung fu movies, and video stores were closing. And so it's like, as I go through all of just years and years worth of reviews, first thing I got to do is I got to check, okay, how hard is this movie to find? Right? Is it available? And it's interesting, some of the stuff that's not even available.
Oh, dang. In the age of digital everything, like, some things just aren't available.
If they are, they're kind of hard to find. I mean, you can find pirated copies of some movies on eBay or iOffer or something like that. But there's a couple movies out there that it's like, I mean, I just feel like the other thing I'm really cognizant of, like right now, the whole reason I'm posting film reviews and other stuff like that is because people have time on their hands, but they don't have a lot of money to spend. And so I'm not going to post an old review of a movie that I love that is out of print on DVD, and to get a DVD is going to cost you $150, right? Like, it's just it's kind of pointless, And that's the crazy thing, man. Is like, I was looking around for some stuff today, and just sort of seeing what's available on Amazon, and somehow I stumbled across a link for Dawn of the Dead, the original Dawn of the Dead, the George Romero movie. The Blu-ray of that's out of print, so it's like almost $200. And I'm like, yo, why? So, it's kind of crazy. It's all. Oh yeah,
crazy. Dang. I'm always a big believer that, any content that you make, regardless of what time period that you make it in, it's always going to be relevant to somebody. It's always going to be valuable to somebody. And so, if you don't have anything new, I mean, just recycle the stuff that you got. I mean, reruns, like, there's TV stations that made a living off of reruns.
Yeah, no, that's true, man. It's funny because I posted a review a couple days ago, and all these people kept hitting me up. It's like, oh man, I felt the same way about this movie. I haven't thought about it in a couple of years, And I was just like, it's and part of that comes back to my this almost old school aesthetic. When I was younger, late teens, early 20s, I used to work in a video store. So I've always had this appreciation for film and older film, but also I had this sort of knack for like turning people on to stuff they hadn't heard of before, and that was sort of your job at a video store back in the day, which is one of those things like now people are, they have no idea what that
so
is,
you're like a crate digger.
No, when it comes to film, I really am. And in fact, I'm thinking about doing some online, I guess like courses, maybe something like that. I don't know. But, one of the things I tell people is, especially if someone wants to be a writer, I tell them, well, you need to find something that something that you're interested in, a topic that you're really interested in. And then you need to become an expert in that topic. And it only needs to be one thing, right? But by becoming an expert in it, you also have to learn to write about it in a way that communicates it to people who know nothing about it, right? And that helps to develop your writing skills. And because I sort of went back and looked at how I became a writer, and part of it was just like, it was studying so much about film and comics and all that stuff, and then writing notes to myself to keep track of it because I was like that really nerdy kid, And so I encourage people to do that now. It's like, and you don't write if you're going to write a film review or a music review, you don't just write, oh, I like this movie because it was really good. I like Tom Cruise movies. No, like, find out who the director is. Talk about the director of photography. What are the themes that they're exploring? That sort of stuff. So.
Oh yeah. And so, as I live in downtown and there's a train just passing by. um, how long have you been a writer? Because I know you've written a lot of like movie reviews, and you've written a lot of stuff. You used to publish a magazine. Like how long have you been in the game?
That's a really good question. I feel like there's different levels of the game, right? There's shooting hoops in your parents' driveway because they got the little hoop on the garage, right? And then there's going to the park and playing, and then there's playing in high school, and then there's playing in college, and then but I got really serious about writing in my early 20s, and then as you said, I published a magazine for several years. I started doing that in '96. And as I was doing that, and it was a lot of film reviews, a lot of pop culture stuff, and the writing was terrible, man. It was garbage. But the game was very different back in those days. There was a lot of fanzines. There was a lot of magazine, stands, and there was, a lot of record stores that carried independent press, and so it was just sort of the right time. It was, the internet hadn't even taken off yet. We're talking, like I said, 95, 96.
This is like AOL days.
Yes, exactly. And so there was a lot of other people doing zines and small press publications and bigger publications too. And over the course of several years, I started to get to know editors at some of these other publications, like Alan Gordon, who was the editor at Rap Pages magazine, which there's like the three biggest hip hop magazines were Rap Pages, The Source, and Vibe back in the day. And somehow Alan Gordon had discovered my writing through my zine, Azz Mofo, and then he offered me some work, at Rap Pages. And that was like, I honestly think that might have been my first professional writing gig. I can't be sure, but then there's a magazine called Giant Robot, which focused a lot on Asian pop culture. Yeah. And I'm a big fan of kung fu movies, so they asked me to write some stuff for them. And like the moment I had to start writing for other people, I actually had to up my game a little bit, right? Because I wasn't a particularly good writer. I guess you could say I was sort of entertaining in a very childish, sophomoric sort of way.
Yeah.
It's like it was. I'm embarrassed by most of that stuff, but I also don't hide from it. So like if it's who I am, you know what I'm saying? It's like being embarrassed of your third grade class picture. What's the point?
I mean, it was cool then, but now it's like, I need to take a step back from this.
But so it's been at least I'd say approximately 25 years that I've been in the game, which as I say that kind of freaks the shit out of me. It's like wow, how could it 25 years? Where did they go?
Yeah, so with it, like, because you always hear like the glitz and the glamour of like being a writer, and you have your laptop or your typewriter or your book, and you're writing all this stuff, and you're just spitting out gold, and then you submit it to an editor, producer, and then they publish it, and then you collect a check. Like how, like what is how is it really? Like
how is it really? It's not like that. Not for me. It's especially sort of in the environment that we're in right now, where there's so much uncertainty, so much economic uncertainty. It's pretty terrifying, right? Like I have a graphic novel that's scheduled to come out January 2021. I finished writing it last June. So I finished writing it in June of 2019. The artist is scheduled to finish drawing it June 2020. So I got a check in 2019 when I signed the contract. I'll get another check when the artist finishes the book, in theory. And then we get our third and final check when the book actually comes out. But it's like, I just got an email from another publisher today saying, oh yeah, we're changing our entire publishing schedule.
What?
So it's like, so you don't know. It's like, I know that in theory, I'm getting a paycheck in June and another paycheck January of next year. This is no exaggeration. Those are the only guaranteed paychecks I have over the next 12 months as I scramble to try to find stuff. Because you know what? That's not true, because I am doing I'm writing for DC. And so I do get paid. I get a page rate from them. Co-writing Young Justice with Brian Bendis. And then if I'm lucky, I'll get some royalty checks for Bitter Root, which I'm co-writing over at Image. But it's like, it's scary, man. And so there's not a lot of glamour to it. And that's the thing. Like you'll hear these stories about, oh yeah, this writer, they got a $20,000 advance, right? Well, first off, you got to write a book for that, right? You got to work for that 20,000. And that, what if that 20,000 is the only check you got for a year? Like, suddenly that's not good money. It's great when you get, like, it's no exaggeration. Last year I got a check for $20,000. It was like for $19,775. And I looked at it, I was like, yo, this is so amazing. I've never had a check for this much money, right? It was so big that when I took it to the bank, they were like, they had to run a check on it or something, right? Because they wanted to make sure it wasn't like a phony check. So it was a check for just under $20K, right? But I knew that I didn't have any definite work lined up for the next 2 to 3 months after that. So it was like, okay, well, you got to pay your rent, you got to pay your, car insurance, your car note, you got to pay the internet bill. There's all these, all these expenses, and that 20,000, that ain't covering a whole year's worth of expenses, right? Even if you're living super frugally in a city like Portland, you're going to be paying at least $1,000 to $2,000 a month for rent. And that's like, I mean, I know people living in studios that are paying over $1,000, and that to me seems like some highway robbery. So there, it's cool and it's a fun living, but it's not always a living. Sometimes it becomes just a hobby. Like, you're going, okay, I'm going to write now. I have a friend who, up until a month ago, he was a writer, and about a month ago he was doing like I can't remember if he was driving for Lyft or it was one of those sort of gigs. It wasn't Lyft or Uber, but it was Instacart or something like that.
One of the like food services.
Yeah. And I was just like, my car is too much of a mess for me to drive Uber or Lyft, right? Like I'd have to maintain a level of cleanliness that I'm just not comfortable with. But I thought about like Instacart or Postmates or some of those sort of things. And, but now everybody's thinking about that. Now everybody's like, oh, I mean, how am I going to make money? It's like, I guess I'm going to have to like start, giving hand jobs or something. I don't know. So
it's it's one of those things where I think for me and my journey, I've been trying to find a way to like at least do something in the ballpark of like where my passion is. Where you're I'm not trying to like, draw for a living or draw to like pay the bills. Yeah. I'm just trying to be able to use a computer. I'm just trying to use Photoshop. I'm like, I'm not going from like flipping burgers and washing dishes to try to make some animation. So for me, I'm like fortunate enough to like now be in that situation, which is great. I love it. And obviously in this day and age, in the current state of affairs, it kind of works out to where I'm not losing too much money. I'm losing like future projects because things are getting canceled, but like my day-to-day sort of like, workflow is not being uprooted,
Yeah. No, it's interesting that you say that, because I was thinking along the same lines, like, okay, well, who knows how, how long things are going to be in a state of chaos. But the reality is that like, even if they, found a way to, spray some Lysol shit all over coronavirus tomorrow, right? Like, we're already in, tough economic straits, and another week, another 2 weeks, it's just going to get crazier and crazier. So, and, for someone like me, I'm not like ancient by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm also not a young man. Like, I can't compete with a 20-year-old or a 25-year-old. I can't, even if I wanted to get a job lugging boxes at a warehouse, which I did throughout most of my 20s and into my 30s, right? When I was writing, I had those gigs. When I wasn't making serious money as a writer, I had it all. I was signed up at temp agencies. I did all that crazy stuff. And it's fine. And there's nothing wrong with doing it, except I got a bad back now. I got bad knees. And again, there's going to be a lot of people looking for stuff like that. And so, I'm just trying to think about, what are some of the things that I can do? And it's like you said, going back and recycling some of the old stuff that you've created and realizing that not all of it's going to be monetized. And it doesn't all have to be monetized, but it's like, yeah, just put it out there, man. Find some old art or some old writing or some old music or something that you've done and share it with people, because especially there's a lot of people who appreciate it because they can see, oh yeah, this is where you were 5 years ago. This is where you were 10 years ago. In my case, oh, this is where you were 25 years ago. Man, you've grown as a, not only have you grown literally because you eat too much, but you've grown as a writer, as a thinker, as a creative person. And I love seeing stuff like that, like on, I follow a lot of artists on Instagram, and I love, people who post their process pictures or their process videos. And it's just, and some of them are some of the best artists, like in the comic book industry, but it's so great to see that they still have it. It's like nothing just happens. A great painting doesn't just, you don't just snap your fingers. It's not that, it's just there. A great book doesn't just happen because you thought about it. Like, you got to put the time in.
Yeah. And that's always something that which is weird. Like, I'm meeting younger artists now. Like, I met somebody, I met a kid that just woke up one day and said, I want to make a video game. and he just downloaded Unity, and his brother is brother's an artist, so they just started making a video game. And I'm talking to him, and I'm like, dude, like, with where you're at right now, like, you're 19 and you are almost have a beta of a video game. Like, you just need to start just posting just the process of it, because this is how it starts. This is how you play the game.
The true story. When I started my own magazine, I had no idea what I was doing. I had no idea whatsoever. So this was 95 when I first started working on it, and I had a computer. It was one of those. It was a 486 IBM 486. It was like, this thing probably had 32 megabytes of memory.
Oh,
I mean, it was a big giant behemoth. It was running Windows 3 or something like that.
Oh, damn. It didn't even have the year on it.
Yeah. Well, so because the next operating system was Windows 95, and that's how I remember. So I had gotten the computer in 94. 95, I was learning how to use it. I decided I wanted to start this, do a publication. I had no idea what I was doing, though, right? And I remember I walked into an Office Depot, and I said to the guy at the computer thing where all the computers were, I said, yeah, I'm looking for something that, I don't know, if I wanted to do a newsletter or something like that. That's what I said, like a newsletter or brochures. Because I figured if there was some sort of software that could do that, I could use that to make a magazine, right? And it was, so that what they sold me was a Microsoft software publisher, Microsoft Publisher, which was, not the preferred choice of a lot of designers, but it was really affordable back then. So 1995, I got my first version of Publisher. and I became really proficient at it. And so like now here we are 25 years later, I'm still using Publisher for stuff, right? And everyone else I know is using InDesign and all this other stuff.
Only person using Publisher.
Exactly. But it goes back to what you're talking about, this young cat doing the video games. It's like, I literally just decided one day, I want to start my own publication. And I went to a store and said, what do you got? Again, 94, 95, you weren't surfing on the internet trying to figure out what to get, I mean, it was like, but there's a lot to be said for just jumping into it. And I think, there's stuff that I'd like to learn how to do. And it's like, okay, well, what's stopping me? I can hop on YouTube and find a video on like how to fix my washing machine if it goes out, so.
Yeah, it's we're in a digital age where everything is literally possible if you just have the drive to do it.
Yep, exactly.
It's like I'm like sitting here looking at some like 3D prints of like some of the characters that I created. And I'm like, I just wanted to just make a toy based off of my character, so I just went and made one. Just cause.
Well, see, you're a unique beast, though, man. You really are, and I say that in the most positive, reaffirming sort of way, because I know a lot of people that would be like, oh, I'd like to have a toy of something that's in my head. First off, it's something in their head, right? It's not something they took the time out to draw or do, and then like they don't get past the thought of what would be cool. That's it. They only get there, right? It takes a lot to go, what would be cool? And then you break out a pen or whatever, you turn on the computer and you start working. Most people don't get past that phase, the what would be cool phase.
Yeah, it's as I like talk to people like on this podcast and everything, it becomes it often becomes a moment of reflection to where it's like, what? I actually do stuff.
Yeah. No, it's look, man, I've been going through some of my old, as I, sort of trying to repurpose old content, old material. And I told somebody this the other day and they were shocked. I said, I can't find all of them because a lot of them were on a hard drive that got lost years ago. But I guarantee I've reviewed over 10,000 movies. And I tell people that, and they're like, "That's not possible. How could you review that many?" And I'm like, "Well, the thing you got to keep in mind is, I was working at a newspaper for years, and if there was a film festival in town, like say there was the Portland LBGTQ Film Festival or whatever they called it back then, because it had a different name, but they might show 50 movies over the course of 2 weeks, and I'd watch all of them. I'd have to, they bring me a box of, back then it was a box of VHS tapes or maybe some DVDs. But Sean Levy, who was the film critic over at the Oregonian, him and I, there was one year where we were sort of having a competition because we were getting into the end of February. The end of February. And we were like, he was like, yeah, I've already seen 300 movies this year. And I was like, I've only seen 250, and people were, I can't remember where we were when we were talking about it, but people were like, that's not possible. And Sean and I were both like, well, we just got back from Sundance Film Festival where we saw 35 films, and then the Portland International Film Festival came up. So like, yeah, I've got 10,000 film reviews, just at least 10,000.
Just sitting there, just
it's crazy because, going back to, like using Microsoft Publisher or programs like that. When I worked at the newspaper, the first couple of years I was there, they had this really weird word processing program. I can't even remember what it was, that only worked on Macs, on Apples, and like nothing I wrote those first few years survived. Like they switched to something else, and then it was like, well, okay. No matter how much you might complain about certain things, it's like, okay, yeah, I can still open up a Word file from 95. It still works. So, but yeah, no, it's crazy when we start to look back, especially once you start hitting a certain age, where you start being able to look back and go, oh yeah, hey, I did that. There's this long, a long list of accomplishments and achievements. I think the most important thing is that you don't rest on those accomplishments and achievements.
Yeah, and I think that's you tend to lose sight of that when you get like that $20,000 check, and you get these sort of like milestones that you've never reached before, and then you're like, oh man, and then you wake up one day and you're like, wait a minute, I gotta go to work, I gotta produce, I gotta keep this going, and so I've as like one of my projects is starting to like pick up speed on TikTok right now. I'm like kind of trying to like chase the rabbit a little bit, where it's like, how can I outdo myself the next day and the next day and the next day with something that moves so fast like that? But also, it's like, I actually got to make new stuff so that I can actually keep up with this.
It's funny, man, because that's the other thing too. Like, I was thinking about this. Do people even read film reviews anymore? Right? Like I've got these reviews. Some of them are like 2,000 words long. You know what I'm saying? And they go in depth. Who's reading that shit? So I actually was like, maybe I just need to start making some videos or something that's like,
that's what I was going to say. Like, really, people don't read movie reviews; they watch them because people are too lazy to read. I mean, that's
and I've been thinking about that a lot, because that was sort of what happened when I worked at Willamette Week for many years, and towards the end, not only was I getting burned out, but for years, I was at the newspaper for over 7 years, and then I was doing freelance writing all over the web and stuff like that. And I would constantly have people, they find out that I wrote film reviews for a living, and they would say, "Oh, have you seen such and such?" And I'd be like, "Yeah." Did you write a review of it? I say, "Yeah." Oh, yeah. Well, I don't read reviews, And it's like, and I couldn't fault them, because, to be 100% honest, for the most part, I didn't read film reviews that much. I definitely don't read them now. I would read like long think pieces on movies, or I might read about the history of. See, now that to me is what's really fascinating, But nowadays it's like, I just don't know, and so I it's not taking much energy to repurpose these pieces, but it's also like, are people, and here's the thing, as a writer, like, I wrote some pretty decent stuff, and it's like, and some of it's still relevant. I was just reading my review of Beasts of the Southern Wild, which was one of the last major reviews I wrote, and I was like, oh man, whoever wrote this is smart. Like, there was this brief window of time where I was actually intelligent, and my writing reflect that. It was a very brief window of time. Now I sort of look back on it with a certain amount of sadness. It's like, I wish I could get it back.
Yeah, and it's I think it'll be interesting seeing how things go for the rest of this year. I mean, in terms of like content creation, in terms of books, in terms of movies, because really a lot of stuff from what I'm seeing and what I've like followed in the past, it is becoming more like video focused, or like podcast or like streaming focused. And so a perfect example is a lot of like the really big sort of stories of like 2019 blew up as podcast. And so like the big investigative story things, like the thing going like Dr. Death, the thing going with what was it, like 1917 or 1719, I think it was. Those big like journalism sort of projects, they picked up speed because they were accessible through podcasts. And so you don't have to people don't have to spend the energy reading. They just have somebody like read it to them, but they're able to like engage with it while they're working, while they're driving, with all these things that that makes it that has lasting effects with it. Because one of the big things, particularly for Black people, is that Black people just aren't reading like that. And it's because they're working, they're doing all these other things, so they just don't have the luxury to do that. And so it makes it a lot more accessible. And so one of those times it's like you got the script right there, you just got to read it.
Yeah, no, I know. I keep thinking about that. I'm like, maybe I should start a podcast. Maybe I should. And then it's like, and that's the thing. Then I was so eager when I was younger to jump in and learn new stuff,
Yeah.
right? But now I'm like thinking, well, what do I need? Do I got to get a new computer? Do I need to get do I need to get a microphone? What do I need? And
yeah, and you just go down this rabbit hole of other stuff, and because that was I think when we last spoke, that was sort of like the revelation and realization that I had with my projects was that the print is always going to be there, and you can't replace that, but the accessibility of the print has to involve some sort of like audio or video element, just because that's just kind of the nature of the beast now.
Or even just, I mean, I look around, my office right now is a cluttered mess. I haven't straightened it up in probably 4 or 5 months, but there's stacks and stacks of books. And it's like, I talk about, I don't like reading on my tablet. I don't like reading on my computer. Yeah. But I got so much junk. I've got so many books, so many magazines. And I'm like, I need to start doing more stuff digitally, the problem with the digital stuff, though, is to me it feels almost out of sight, out of mind. Like I got a stack of books behind me on this desk behind me. Every time I turn around, I see them, and it's like they're talking to me. They're saying, "Read me, please, read me." All the books that are on my tablet, they ain't saying nothing to me,
Like I used to torrent comics before I had the money to buy them, and so I have just like. I have a hard drive. I have like hidden folders with just unread comics in it that I will probably stumble upon maybe in the next 5 years, looking for something else. And so
it's crazy. I will say though, because every once in a while this happens to me, and I was hanging out with a friend and it happened to her like 2 weeks ago, where I put a moratorium on buying a lot of stuff. Especially because I'll buy it and then I get home and then a month later I realize, I've got 2 copies of this. I have 2 copies of this book, And I was hanging out with a friend of mine. We went to the comic book store, and she was like, "Do I have this one? I don't know. I'm going to get it." And I was like, "Why don't you just wait?" And she was like, "No, I'm pretty sure I don't have it." And like the next day, she's like, "I got 2 copies. Do you want one?" I was like, "Yeah, okay, I'll take one of them." So. It's kind of funny, but it's also sad and pathetic, that I'm this way.
Yeah. And so, circling back to sort of like the comic realm, because it seems like you, for the past, like, I want to say for the past, like, year or so, like, things have definitely started to pick up with you, with a lot of the work that you've been doing.
Yeah, it's definitely been, I've been really lucky, right? In that I've had, like, in 2019, I had 3 really big projects come out in early 2019 that carried me through the second half of the year, in which there wasn't as much stuff coming out. And in the comics industry, it's very easy to get lost and forgotten in a relatively short amount of time. You don't have to work for 3 to 6 months and people are going to forget who you are. Especially in terms of writing for Marvel or DC, and so I knew that. I've seen it happen to other people, and so a lot of what I've been doing is trying to, try to set my own course, so that even if I'm not working at Marvel, even if I'm not working at DC, people know who I am. They know what I've got, right? And so with Bitter Root, which is the image title that I'm doing with Chuck Brown and Sanford Green, it was like, okay, we got to keep this thing going. Even when we take a hiatus from putting it out, we got to make sure people know about this thing and they're looking forward to it coming out. And we have to take our time to make sure we do the best book possible, but make sure that it's like when I was a kid when a new Star Wars movie would come out, and we're talking back in the 80s when it was like, oh, Empire Strikes Back is coming out or Return of the Jedi is coming out. You knew you had to wait 3 years. Like that was the unwritten rule. Minimum of 3-year wait. And it's like, okay, so you kind of do that in comics. You got to make people have to wait for some of this stuff. Sometimes they have to wait more than a month. And you have to make sure that as a creator, you're at least engaging with people and you're letting them know, like in my case, this book that's scheduled for January 2021, it's like, yeah, this book was huge. It took me a year to write it. And when it comes out, it's very similar to the Frederick Douglass book. It's the same publisher. It's another nonfiction work. Like I couldn't talk about the Frederick Douglass book for the first year before it came out. But the thing is that book came out about 15 months ago, and people are still talking about it.
Yeah.
Right. It's like that book has a longer lifespan than, say, most of the stuff I wrote at Marvel. Like I worked on a title at Marvel that I loved. It was called Occupy Avengers. It only lasted 9 issues. And of those 9 issues, I would say 5 of them were some of the best writing I did at Marvel. I really, really loved that title. I'm pretty sure that book is out of print. You could get it on like Comixology, but it's like, ain't nobody going to remember Occupy Avengers. Like nobody remembers it now. It's only been it was just canceled 2 years ago. Whereas The Life of Frederick Douglass, I have teachers and high school, grade school, even college professors that are teaching that book. I've met librarians who are like, oh, we can't keep this book on the shelf. It's constantly checked out. And I'm like, yeah, okay, that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
It's like that thing is going to be around. That book is going to be around. And I would like to do more of that. I think that you have to be very careful in the comic industry, especially if you're doing work at Marvel or DC, because there's only a handful of people whose work really truly stands out and is remembered over the course of time. And when you think about it, like it's got to be like you got to be on a book like X-Men. You got to be, people still remember Chris Claremont, but it's people my age, like people your age might be like, yo, who's Chris Claremont? They don't know any of that stuff. And I mean, prime example, I can name 3 writers whose runs on Daredevil I remember. I remember Frank Miller's run, I remember Ed Brubaker's run, and I remember Brian Bendis' run. That's it. I don't know who else has written Daredevil. The character is 50, 60
years
he's old.
And there's so many writers and TV shows and movies and all that stuff. And yeah.
Yep. I mean, I wrote Luke Cage. I don't know most of the people who've written Luke Cage. Actually, I do know who most of them are. But like that Luke Cage title that I did for Marvel, if Occupy Avengers was some of my best writing, Luke Cage was some of my worst writing. And I don't mind if people forget it. I would just assume, and if people like it, I'm not going to shit on their opinions. I just know that as a creative person, I was not fulfilled. There was a lot of editorial interference on that title, and what I wanted to do. There's what you want to do, and then there's what gets done, and as close as those two can get is great. But the further apart they are, the more it just sucks. That's just it.
And so with when you're working in that sort of industry, or I mean the comics industry, the creative industry, and you're always forced to sort of play with maintaining control of it and having sort of creative license, and then doing something that you kind of have to like make a compromise with just to keep the the lights on. Like how what is that balance like? Because for people on the outside looking in, I always hear people admiring sort of the freelance life. of like, oh, you get to do this, you get to do that, and you get to control your own schedule. But it comes at a price, that people honestly just don't understand.
No, it's really, so this is an interesting story, right? I wrote a novel back in like 2009, I believe. Yeah, I wrote it in 2009, 2010. It took me a while to write it. And I took it out. I managed to get an agent. It was briefly optioned even before I had a publishing deal, but I was never able to get a publishing deal on it. And so I decided, because this is sort of stuff I do, I'm going to self-publish this thing, right? So I self-published it, and it was well received. And it's a young adult novel, and it's a superhero book. So it's a prose book, no images, but it's basically superhero genre. And at that point, there was no young adult fiction superhero prose.
Oh, wow.
Nothing, right? And so since then, one of the things I started thinking was, well, as I'm writing this second book, because there's a sequel to it, I thought to myself, if I could just start getting more work in comics, which is something I wanted to do anyway, but if I could get more work in comics, and if I could build a name for myself, I could use that to help promote my self-published novels.
Okay.
Right? And I still haven't finished that second novel, right? And ain't nobody read that first one, right? There's a few thousand people have read it, but it ain't making the New York Times bestsellers list. And part of it is like, it's really difficult to write. It's difficult enough to write 2 or 3 comics a month. And then if you have some other side hustle, like for me, teaching, but if you got something else going, writing that novel ain't going to happen.
Yeah.
And at least for me, it doesn't feel like it's going to happen. So, that balance can be pretty difficult. I've always been really fortunate in that. I would say that as I've worked in comics, I got my first paid gig in comics around 2003 or 2004, but my career really started taking off around 2012 or so. Yeah, 2012. And, but for the most part, there hasn't been a time where I was working on something if I was working on something that was frustrating me, or that I was having difficulty with, say, the editor or the publisher, some sort of freelance gig, I always had another comic project that I was working on, either for another publisher or myself, that felt great. Okay. And so there was, it was like, I hate working at McDonald's, but I love working at Burger King. So I do my day shift I do at McDonald's, and then my evening shift I go to Burger King, right? So that might be the worst analogy I've ever come up with, but I think you get what I'm saying, right? So.
Okay. Yeah, and so it seems like over the past like 6 or 7 months, you've happened to come with like 2 or 3 Kickstarters. And so, so how is it sort of like doing a Kickstarter now and like managing that stuff on top of all the other stuff that you're doing? Because you're essentially using Kickstarter to like self-publish these things, right?
Yeah. No. So I had made this decision probably about 4 years ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago. Really, as things were starting to take off for me at Marvel and DC, I knew that I was going to want to do some projects that I owned that were creator owned. And I was talking to some other publishers. Image is the best publisher if you're doing creator owned stuff, hands down. There's other good publishers out there, but they don't have the best deals all the time. And so as I was developing a couple different projects, I realized, I'm going to have to self-publish these. And I already knew I was going to start a self-publishing, endeavor in some capacity. But like the Hated, which I'm doing right now, which is my most recent Kickstarter, there was a couple different publishers made offers on that title, but they weren't good offers. And I was like, well, I know how many units you're moving of your titles. I track this sort of stuff. And I know that I can move more. And so if you go to a publisher and that publisher puts your work out, but it doesn't sell that well for them, they're going to use that against you. Even if they say they're not going to, they do. And so I had done enough work for smaller publishers, and I saw that happening enough to myself and other creators that I was like, well, why would I bring to you, like, okay, I'm going to give you a prime example. The Hated, the first issue of The Hated, which is a little bit longer than a typical comic. It's probably, when it's all said and done, it's going to be about 36 pages of content, and then another 3 or 4 backup pages of different things. The most any publisher offered me in terms of an advance to do The Hated was $6,000.
Oh, wow.
Now, that was $6,000 to go to me and the entire art team to do an entire issue, okay? And for that $6,000, they wanted a piece of that intellectual property. Not a big piece, but they still wanted a piece of it, right? And I was like, well, I got $6,000 in my pocket, right? So you're asking me to take off my pants, give you my pants, and all the money that's in it, right? Why am I going to do this for $6,000? And so, like with Kickstarter, with the Kickstarter for this project, I was like, okay, I'm going to put it all on the line, and I'm going to make this thing happen. And if it fails because of me. Yeah. But if it succeeds because of me. And it's there's nothing. The only thing that's worse than if you put something out there and it doesn't find its audience, right, is when you work with a publisher or you work with an entity that they blow it, right? It's like, it's like you're watching it and you're just going, could you just do this? Yeah. I remember going to I'm not going to say who the publisher is, but if I tell the story, everyone's going to know who the publisher is.
Like,
so
what I would say is, how far the ball dropped with the Black Eyed Peas book with Marvel.
Oh yeah.
Like for any hip hop ad, for everybody that's listening, Marvel published a book, a graphic novel, augmented reality graphic novel, with the Black Eyed Peas that has like Ice-T, Queen Latifah, LL Cool J, like half of the Wu-Tang Clan. Every like hip hop head would go crazy over that, and nobody knows about it. Missed opportunity.
I have a copy of it, but I don't even know where it is.
I have a copy because I use that as like the example of like what not to do and what to do at the same time.
And so that's the thing. It's like, with the Hated, with this most recent Kickstarter, I haven't. I mean, I know how much money we made. I haven't gone through and tallied up the total number of orders, because there's like some retailers bought some stuff. So I know if the retailers bought it, that's going to be like 10 copies, even though it only shows up as one sale. So, but I know I've moved over 1,000 units, right? Essentially sight unseen. Just a few sample pages and me making a pitch, right? I am not, this is not an exaggeration. Anyone who's listening to this might think I'm making this up, but it's not an exaggeration. I have worked for publishers that you have heard of, that you've probably read titles that they've put out, that they haven't even been able to move 1,000 units of a book that I've written for them.
Oh, wow.
I've written stuff where I've had stuff come out from certain publishers where the numbers didn't even break 600-700 units sold. And the thing is like, well, I'm never gonna make royalties off of that, because they all set their royalty threshold at like 100,000 units.
Ooh,
it's seriously, it's like that. It's like you can't even sell 1,000 units, let alone 100,000, right? So, And then the other thing too, and you know this because you've done some self-publishing. If I write this book for you, and especially if I own the property or own part of the property, co-own it with you, I shouldn't be buying this book at half off retail. I should be buying this book at cost plus shipping, right? And there ain't no, like, this is the hidden secret. I would say I can think of one publisher who isn't trying to make money off of creators buying copies of their own books. Only one. And that's Image. Image isn't trying to make money by selling my book to me so I can sell it at conventions. Every other publisher is doing it. Every other publisher. So, if I want to go to a convention and I want to sell a copy of a book that I wrote for whether it's Marvel or DC, I got to order it. I have a friend who's a retailer, so I order through him. I get it for 50% off. But if it's a $20 book, I got to pay $10 for it, plus the shipping. And, you don't have to be a economics genius or a marketing genius to know that, well, if the product costs $10 and then you can, and you got to sell it for 20, it's not a lot of wiggle room, right? You're not making much money. So that was another reason why I decided to start doing it myself. I was like, I'm tired of going to a convention and hustling to barely make any money. And that money that the people who are benefiting from it most are big, huge corporations, and I'm not even necessarily getting to write all the things that I want to write. I mean, some of it I'm having a great time, so don't get me wrong. And I know that I'm fortunate, but I also know that there's more stories that I want to tell than what I'm being asked to tell or being allowed to tell at these publishers. So rather than complain about it, which it sounds like I'm doing right now, but I'm not really, because what I did is I just started my own company, and I was like, I'm going to put it out myself.
Okay. So with it, what is it like sort of being in that role of really being the gatekeeper for a lot of the things that you do, or a lot of the titles that you're doing now?
Oh, it's terrifying, man. It's terrifying. I've got, so through my little comics publishing company, I put out one comic so far.
Okay.
That's a supernatural wrestling comic, which was a lot of fun. I saw the artist like a week or two ago, and he's like, dude, when are you going to get me the script for issue number 2? And I was like, I'm working on it, right? And then the Western that is getting ready to come out in the next, we'll say 2 months, the artist just sent me a message today. He's like, hey, when's the script to number 2 coming? And I'm like, okay, you'll get yours before the wrestling guy's going to get his. But it's like, okay, so I've got to, I reached out to my printer today and was making sure, like, are you guys staying open during this whole, coronavirus thing? Because if not, if they close down before we're ready to go to print, then I either got to find another printer or I got to wait till they open their doors back up again. And so it's like, okay, I need to check that. And all right, should I go buy my postage now, through stamps.com or something like that before postage rates go up? There's all these little things like one of some of the incentive giveaways are stickers, and everybody should have this problem. There's a sticker that every person who got a physical copy of the book gets. Well, that means I've got to print at least 1,500 stickers, right? Which is more than I had budgeted for. Damn. And so the place I go to get my stickers, they sell them in blocks of it goes 250, 500, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, and I'm like, I don't need 2,000 stickers. I need like maybe 1,200, 1,250 at the most. And so I'm emailing them trying to get an answer, because it's like, and some people would be like, oh, so what if you get 500 more stickers than you need? It's like, yeah, but those 500 stickers cost
X amount.
They cost X amount of dollars. And like, I got bills I got to pay. I got to pay my colorist. I got to pay my art, because I'm paying everybody who works for me, right? And that's the thing. It's like, and I was just talking to a friend of mine does some publishing, and he goes through Kickstarter, and he was like, yo, man, you put in all this work, and then you ain't making no money. You're lucky if you haven't lost any money. And that's the key thing. I know a bunch of people who've done Kickstarters. I was just talking to one a couple days ago, and their project this is the craziest thing, man. The paper that it was printed on was a little bit heavier than they realized. And so the book weighed more than they thought it was going to weigh. And the difference between what they thought it was going to weigh and what it actually weighed was a 50-cent difference. Okay?
That's
a huge amount, God. Right? Because they went from I can't remember why they were having trouble with sending it media mail. I mean, because then you get into all this other stuff, right?
The whole infrastructure of shipping.
Yep. Well, 50 cents doesn't sound like a lot.
Yeah.
Until you go, oh, I had to ship 2,000 of these units, and that 50 cents is now $1,000. You know, and this is all the shit you got to think about when you know, there's a lot to be said for just writing for Marvel or just writing for DC and turning it in. You know, you're not having to worry about like, oh, wait a sec. Hey, you know, I just paid you a ton of money to draw this stuff. I need you to fill out this W-2 form so I can, you know, so I can issue you a 1099 so I can write off the money that I gave you, you know?
It's.
But you know what? I'm doing it. And I'm, as much as I might complain about it, I kind of love doing it.
I think as you mentioned that, as you talk about that, quite often like people have asked me like, oh, why aren't you like scaling like the stuff that you're doing? You're doing a whole bunch of stuff, and you don't need to do all that stuff. You could just get other people to do it, and then focus on the things that you're good at. And I'm like, I understand that, but if I do it myself and it takes a little bit longer, I don't have to fill out all that paperwork, you know,
or spend all
that money. And so, you know, if when I had a project, earlier last year that was worth like, got it for like $5,000, right? So I had $5,000 in the bank, boom. And I essentially used that as like seed money to just like take my time to work on the stuff that I needed to work on. You know, so I found out about Fiverr, and I ended up getting a jump start on like 3D models. You know, I ended up getting a course to learn about like all the augmented reality stuff. I had some money to like as a buffer to like actually spend the time to learn that stuff, and then and then like things started to like slowly come together. But like I was chipping away at that like $5,000 because I could control that, opposed to just saying, okay, this is a page rate. You know, this is how much they need, and I got to get it to them so I can get my product back. You know, and so it's, you know, I had the time, which I could afford. And so then it was a matter of just like, how do I make this mess stretch? You know, and
and now I'm doing that with like, you know, $10. I got a quarter right here. What am I going to do with this? You know, I realized the other day I'm gonna have to give up coffee, man. I don't have a coffee maker, right? Because what I like to do in the morning is I get up and I go for a walk and I get a cup of coffee. It provides me an excuse to get out, get a little bit of exercise, and you know really get the day going. But I was like, I can't do it. First off, all the places are closing
I was
right
like
now,
that doesn't translate very well right now.
But I was like, oh man, I got to give it up just because that, you know, what, $2-3 for a cup of coffee doesn't sound like a lot until you realize, okay, that's, you know, if you do a coffee every day of the month, that's like $90. You know, it's like right now, $90 is a lot of money. You know, it's like
it goes away. You know, it goes away. Yeah, and so it's a. So one of the things that with Bitterroot, you know, like that is definitely picked up, and you know, there's a lot of anticipation for, you know, the next volume, and then also you know, you have kind of a deal on the line.
We do, and it's it's interesting because so issue 7 just dropped earlier this week. Issue 6 came out last month. This arc is going to be 5 issues, so we've got 3 more to go. Issue 8 just I think it went to press today. I think, and it's moving along. People are really getting into it. It's getting great reviews, and but it's also like, oh yeah, comics book stores are closing right now, or they're taking a hiatus. Are people going to be able to get their comics? And I had a call with someone from Hollywood the other day regarding Bitter Root, and things are moving along, but at the same time, Hollywood is shut down, and so it's like, okay, well, you guys optioned this for a specific amount of time, but we're going to have to do what all the landlords are being forced to do, which is like, okay, if production shuts down for 3 months, we got to give you that 3 months for free, right? It's like, but they're really committed at this point. They're really committed to making the movie, and Ryan Coogler and his team really believe in it, but it at the same time, this is exciting, man. I can't tell you how cool it is, and what people don't get is you option something, and if you're fortunate, you get a certain amount of money, which we did, but that money had to be split 3 ways, and then some had to go to the lawyer, right? But we don't get another paycheck unless that movie goes into production. And, so it's like, we ain't living large. You know what I'm saying? It's like, especially when you take into consideration, like, oh, okay, wait a sec. All my work just dried up. That life of a freelancer thing that you're talking about, where it's like that $5,000, how do you make that stretch? How do you make that last? And it's, you get any check for more than $50 and you want to run out and spend it, it's like, oh, I should go get a new car. I got a check. You get a check for $20,000. A lot of people get a check for $20,000. They're spending it big time. I pulled out like $5,000 for taxes, which wasn't going to be enough. I pulled out $5,000 for taxes, and then I just put the other 15 in. And I was just like, you just need to forget that it's there, because a year from now, 2 years from now, you will need it, and it's now to almost a little, not quite a year, and I've hit a rough spot, and I know that I'll get through, I'll get through the next 3 to 4 months. It's going to be difficult, but it's about planning ahead, and the key thing, I remember when I left my job at the newspaper, I had enough money in the bank to last me for close to a year. And I was like, okay, I'm not going to, stress about finding a job. And then I didn't find a job. And then I'm struggling to find a job. And the money's running out. And the one thing I did was, at some point, I cashed in my 401k. And, I got they hit you with these penalties if you cash in prematurely. I was like, yeah, I got to do it. I need this money. And then it was right before the market crash of 2008. And so I got my money out. I got dinged with a fine, but I didn't lose anything. And I had some friends who lost a lot in 2008. And I was like, okay, yeah, there's so much for those 401ks. You might as well just keep a bag of cash laying around.
Just put it in your...
hide it underneath your shotgun shells.
Just put it in your bed and just stitch that bed up and just kind of just go from there. It's
exactly.
Yeah, things are like, it's just really, it's really crazy right now, because some people are doing okay, some people are not doing okay. And there's other people that are like capitalizing on this, and it's just like, dang, it's crazy. What is it like? A lot of distilleries are just selling hand sanitizer now, just it's like this is literally like idiocracy. Like,
it is.
Like it.
But I think that, I mean, as someone who's deeply cynical most of the time, I have to try to remain optimistic about it, because otherwise, like, this is gonna like I was thinking about the mental health cost of all
Yeah.
of this, right? I went to the grocery store today, walked to the grocery store, just had to pick up a couple things. But as I was there, I was like, oh, here's some stuff that you're seeing, all the beans are gone, all the rice is gone. I don't eat beans and rice that often, but shit, I should have bought some, and I was, and I almost never eat macaroni and cheese, especially not the kind that comes in a box, right? But I was like, well, it's on sale, and I might as well get some in case things get dicey at some point, right? But as I'm standing in line and I'm looking at, like, people with all the stuff they're getting, and I'm thinking to myself, this shit's insane.
Yeah.
It's like, do you, like, do you really need this much kitty litter? Or do you really need this? And the thing is like, there's this panic and this scared mentality that is, that we don't have to be that scared, right? It's like, yeah, this is bad, but it's bad things happen, and it's like, if more people used common sense as opposed to these fools who are going to Florida for spring break, right? It's like, okay, people like you and I, we're probably in the vast majority, but it only takes that 10 percentile that's still going to go to, Daytona Beach for spring break to screw it up.
They have a grand old time. They come back and everybody's sick.
Yeah. Well, I've always said, man, they should just take the state of Florida and just kind of saw it off and hook a tow line up to Cuba and give it to Cuba, man. And now I feel that way even more so now. So
yeah. It's. I mean, that definitely sounds like a premise to a great little story.
Yeah. I might have to write that one down. But yeah, it's look, we have to adapt. Life is all about adapting and changing, even if sometimes it's usually it's very minuscule changes that happen fairly regularly. This is like really big changes, and even for myself, it's like, I kept saying for the last 3-4 years, I do a lot of conventions, to the point that I would say probably a good 20 to 30% of my annual income is earned by going to conventions. And about, I'll say like 3-4 years ago, I skipped a couple shows, and I really felt it. I felt it in my bank account. And so I said at that point, I have to find something else. I can't be dependent on these conventions. But then I went right back to it, right? You go to a really good convention, and maybe you haven't made much money over the last month or two, but then you pull in $3 to $5 grand in a weekend, and it's like, oh, okay, now I don't have to worry for another 2-3 months, right? But now I'm like, yo, I was depending on, like, Emerald City. I was depending on it big time. I know a lot of people were, and it's like, well, Emerald City's not happening. WonderCon's not happening. This other one in California that I was supposed to do got pushed back, and it's like, oh, damn.
Yeah.
Like, I should have done this. Like, we all should have done this, right? They always say, keep batteries and a flashlight around in case the power goes out. And then the power goes out, and you realize, oh, you got the flashlight, but you don't have the batteries. Or you have the batteries, but you don't have the flashlight,
Yeah.
So,
or you have your phone, and that thing's dead, too.
Yes. It was funny because last week there was a power outage where in my neighborhood, it was the day that it snowed.
Oh, yeah.
And it, like, I woke up at like 4 a.m, and I was like, what's going on? And, the power's out. And I try to remember every night to plug in everything, my phone, my tablet, my laptop, just for that reason, so that it, because if the power goes out, your Wi-Fi goes out too. So you got to make sure your phone and your tablet are charged, because that's the only way you're going to get in touch with PGE and tell them that, hey, yo, I don't have no power. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's.
Oh, you live, you learn.
Yeah. So to wrap up,
Yep.
are there any what's coming up? Like you have stuff coming out in 2021. You got like it seems like everything's kind of all over the place with you.
So, okay, so I'm co-writing Young Justice at DC with Brian Bendis. That's out right now. The second issue that we did together just came out. Third one's coming out next month. Bitter Root is coming out. I can't say for sure how these production schedules are because everybody's sort of reshifting and thinking. But so Bitter Root is coming out. So probably well into the summer, I'm going to have those two titles coming out. And then Bendis and I did Naomi together, and we're going to do a follow-up to that. I've got The Hated coming out, which is my own title. I've got One Fall, which is my own title. That's coming out. And I have maybe two more that'll be out hopefully before this year is up. And then in January, I've got a new graphic novel coming out that I'm not supposed to talk about. It's a nonfiction book. It's the history of the Black Panther Party. And it's written, and it's probably 75% drawn. It looks amazing. It was one of the most challenging things of my career. And so that'll be January. And then I'm focusing on like trying to write some TV scripts or maybe a screenplay and trying to go over into that world, because it's you realize that if you get into the Writers Guild of America and you sell a screenplay, the minimum you're going to get paid by union standards is like $50,000.
Whoa!
Right? Whereas, if you write for Marvel, in order to earn $50,000, you would have to write. I think I haven't worked for them in a while, but I think they just lowered their page rate. You would have to write more than 50 comics, though, in order to make that money. Most writers at Marvel, who, especially if they're just getting started, most of them aren't making, they're probably making $60, $70 a page, and the books are only 20 pages. So let's just say, for the sake of argument, you're getting paid $70 a page. So 70 times 20 is
just like
how much is that? $1,400?
Yeah, that's like $1,400.
Yeah, you're making $1,400. Yeah. and you can't live off of that.
Yeah, you can't live off of that, and it takes a while to do a page.
Yeah, it does. It really does. So, but yeah, so The Hated that'll be out. Hopefully, it's scheduled to come out in June, but it might come out a little sooner. And that's like my baby. It's this Western, this alternative historical timeline, and the art is phenomenal. And the second issue will be out before this year is up. And I'm just pushing. I'm figuring out what I'm going to do. I'm thinking I need to write a sequel to that book that I wrote. Over 10 years ago.
Just republish it as like a little blog series or something.
Yeah, no, I'm actually going to republish it as the sort of like the director's cut, the definitive cut version, because I have some stuff I want to do. I want to get some spot illustrations. I've just commissioned someone to do some spot illustrations because, again, crowdfunding has changed the game in a lot of ways. And the key is if you can deliver, then I don't have any problems, going and asking for the money, because it's not like you're panhandling. I mean, with The Hated, the book was 100% drawn.
Yeah.
We were we were still waiting for a couple pages to be colored. And then I've got the backup stuff. I've got to wrap that up, but I didn't go to Kickstarter and ask for money with a book that was only partially done. I just wasn't going to do it.
Yeah. And I think, from my experience using with the Kickstarter and all that stuff, if you just get the thing done and then you put it out there and then you get to kind of relax a little bit, opposed to scrambling to actually, okay, we gotta get to work now. It's like, just get that mess done, and that way it's less you have to worry about in the future, because you mess around and make it blow up. Like as I'm thinking about like Anthony in the back of my head, that mess around and blows up, and then you gotta one, finish the book, and then you gotta fulfill freaking 1,000 orders that you're doing out of your apartment. You know?
Yeah. No, that's the thing. It's like, you got to stuff the envelopes. If you're not willing to fork over the money to pay somebody else to do the fulfillment, you got to do it. And that's my biggest. That's one of my biggest concerns is when this is ready. The last campaign that we did, I got like 5 or 6 people together, and we got a space, a bunch of banquet tables, and in 4 hours we had filled all the envelopes, right? Close to 1,000. But now we're going to have over 1,000, and it's like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to get a space, and I don't know if people are going to come out, and knock on wood, come late May, things will have changed and for the better. Let me say that things will have changed for the better. So, we'll see.
We'll see. Yep. And so with that, we'll just call it a wrap. I appreciate the time.
All right.
Also, I'm starting printing services, so if you need something, let me know.
always hustling, man. I love that.
You know it. Part of it is because I want to control the way my books look, and and it's it was an opportunity that presented itself to me, so I kind of just took it on. And so it's I know someone else who does that too, and now he's printing stuff for other people, and that becomes a good hustle. I ain't doing that one, man. That's too much right now. Yeah, it's you start dreaming about paper and the different paper stocks and weights and all that.
Yes,
it becomes and then you get mad when like the wrong paper stock comes in, and you're like, how dare you like mix this up? How dare you?
Yeah, see, and I'm not a paper stock geek like some people are. I'll reach out to my printer and I'll go, just whatever you gave me last time. What was that? That was 70-pound non-gloss. Okay, fine, that's it. But no, it is what it is. It's a crazy thing. So.
Yep, but okay. Be safe. Try not to go on too many morning walks. I got to get out, man. I got to get out and enjoy the day a little bit. Yeah, it has been like the days have been like amazing, for the past couple of days. Yeah. And so, I got a port, so I'm gonna just kind of chill out there, and then we'll see how it goes. People watch and stuff like that. Yep.
All right, man. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Definitely. So I'll let you know when it launches, and then we'll kind of stay in contact.
All right. I'll talk to you soon.
See you. Again, I want to give another shout out to the Soul District Business Association and Flossin Media for helping me put this on. I'm your host, Stephen Christian. I mixed and mastered this podcast. I also did all the interviews. And if you see any of the stuff on YouTube, I put all that stuff together as well. With all the social distancing things right now, I'm producing this right out of my home studio. So if you have a chance, make sure to follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Medium at PDX Black Rose, which is PDX BLACKROSE. And if you're on Patreon, hit us up on there. We would love your support. If you don't do anything else, definitely rate and review us on your favorite podcast platform. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher. And on top of that, be sure to share this with your friends. The purpose of this podcast is to highlight the movers and shakers in Portland that are doing things in the Black community. And by supporting this podcast, you're supporting the community as a whole. So with that being said, thank you for your time, and I'll catch you on the flip side. The intro song is brought to you by Andy Stokes. And the outro song is brought to you by Spring Gang from Epidemic Sound.